Hi, it's Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show. I'm your host, and for nearly 2 decades now, I've been an executive coach and leadership development consultant. And on this show, I share evidence-based insights from my coaching, leadership, and psychological expertise, and inspiring interviews that help women like you to combine your work, life, and motherhood in a more successful and sustainable way. Join me and my special guests as we delve into leadership and lifestyle topics for women, empowering you to thrive one conversation at a time. I'm so happy that you're here, and let's get on with today's episode. There's so much advice in the parenting space with young children, some conflicting, some confusing, but often overwhelming. But what about as our children get older? I'm really feeling this now that my son is leaving primary school this summer and entering into the world of big school. And this transition feels huge as we start to navigate things like him having a phone, approaching teenage years, and basically letting my child spread their wings and fly. And the advice and supports for parents feels far less at this stage, but just as important. And that's why in this episode, I'm thrilled to have a very special guest, Anita Cleare, joining us. Anita is a renowned parenting speaker, writer and coach, and she has a background in developmental psychology. And she's dedicated her career to helping parents navigate the challenges of balancing successful careers with the demands of raising children. And in today's episode, we dive into the world of working parents, how we support our children, whatever their age. But specifically, we dive into parenting teenagers. And Anita brings her honesty and relatability to this conversation, giving us hope and practical advice without sugarcoating the realities. We talk about the fears that come from parenting teens, whether it be the online world, exams, and the diminishing control parents have as their children grow more independent. And Anita shares some invaluable insights on mental health and how to handle those moments when teenagers seem to retreat into their own worlds. And she emphasises the importance of us as parents being able to tolerate rejection and maintaining a relationship with your teen as they really form new relationships outside of the family system. And one of the highlights of our conversation is Anita's explanation on the neuroscience behind teenage brains. And she provides specific strategies on how parents can support their children through that critical period. But also she shares some very useful general advice if you're a parent and a working parent, whatever the age of your children. And this was such a reassuring and informative discussion with Anita. And I think you're going to walk away with some really practical tools to help you stay connected, particularly if you've got teenagers, while navigating those years, especially if you're a working parent. So I won't keep you any longer. Let's dive in and welcome Anita. Thank you, Anita. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. We've been planning this conversation for a long, long time, and I've been connected to your work for a long time. So I can't wait to share this with my audience.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Nikki.
So for those that don't yet know about you and your work, can you tell us a bit about what you do and kind of the journey you've gone on to do the work?
Yeah, so I describe myself as a parenting writer, speaker, and coach, because those are the 3 things that I do. So the majority of my work is working with working parents, particularly in the workplace, delivering some coaching, particularly seminars, webinars, parenting clinics, trying to work with working parents on whatever parenting challenges they've got. Obviously, I write a parenting advice blog, and I write books, and I do a bit of coaching in terms of one-to-one with parents from private practice. But my journey started off actually in the public sector in local authority children's services. So I was working as a senior manager in family support for many years. I've been in this industry now for over 20 years. And I was working on early intervention projects for parents, so things like Sure Start, Children's Centre Programme, and early intervention for teenagers around teenage pregnancy and youth offending, and also some of the more intensive family support for families who were really struggling. And I loved that. I loved that work. But I got to the point where I thought, do you know what? I was a single parent at that time with two small children, and I was working. And I realized a lot of the services that we were offering, I wouldn't be able to take up because I was at work. And it really struck me that an awful lot of the support that's out there for parents ignores the fact that they work. And, you know, we would put on sessions and courses, and they would be during the day, which if you're on, you know, parental leave, brilliant. But if you're back at work, you can't actually access. So I set up the Positive Parenting Project back in 2013 with the aim of just taking that quality, that evidence-based support that we had in the public sector and taking that into the workplace and trying to, rather than asking parents to come to us for support, to take it to where they were and really tailor it to the modern reality that's what parents do. We work.
Brilliant. And as you say, I imagine the work that you did was in quite situations where people needed that almost like critical support. But actually, what about those that are kind of further upstream that are not struggling as much, but may get to that point at some point? So as you say, doing it in the workplace and where they are in that journey. Oh, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you know what? The thing that I also felt was there's so much rubbish on the internet about parenting. And if we just leave people to kind of Google things, you go into a rabbit hole where you've no idea whether the advice you're getting is good, if it's quality or anything else. And I just thought that's not fair on parents just to leave them to try and work it out for themselves.
So you started that business in 2011. And then at what point did you write your book then, your first book? Because obviously you've got another book coming out.
Yeah. So the Work Parent Switch came out in 2020, right at the beginning, just before the pandemic, which wasn't the best timing ever. And then it came out in a variety of editions, the US edition and different languages, kind of in the 2 years after that. It was kind of slightly stretched out. So I'd written it in 2019.
And what inspired you to write the book? Because as you've just lived through, but you know, writing a book is such an intense process. What actually made you think, do you know what, I want to give this the time and energy?
There were a couple of reasons. So one is not all parents are lucky enough to work for employers who will get me in to talk to them. And I wanted to reach as many parents as I possibly could. And I also, I read a lot of parenting books. I do a lot of research around children's development. And it struck me that a lot of the books that are out there tend to assume that we've got unlimited time, that we just need to be told, oh, well, use these strategies and that we'll be able to do it. And that wasn't my lived experience. I knew, I'd studied developmental psychology to postgraduate level. And I still found myself shouting at my kids when I was trying to get them out of the house in the morning because I was stressed about getting to work. And I just thought, this isn't just about what we need to do as parents. We need some empathy and understanding of the context in which we're parenting. So I set out to write a positive parenting guide for working parents, really specifically, that said, I get it. I get that you have all of these pressures. I get that you're, in this position. And in that context, these are some parenting ideas and some understandings and some strategies that I think will be helpful.
And I'm imagining people are now listening going, this is right up my street. So to give people a bit of a flavour of the kind of things that are in the book, can you kind of share maybe a couple of scenarios that you might cover in the book or a couple of strategies?
Yeah, I think one of the key messages in the book is to really understand that the mindset that we use at work and the skills and the strengths that we need for being good at our jobs is not the same as the mindset and the skills and the strengths that we need to bring to our children. So, when we're working, if you're working, most of us will be using an awful lot of our executive functions, our planning, organizing, goal-focused, task-focused thinking 3 steps ahead. Right, what have I got to do next? What have I got to do next? And then after that, brilliant for work. If you take that to parenting, we get really easily frustrated because children are not in that mode, partly because of their brain development. That wouldn't be good for them. They need to be distractible and unfocused and, in the moment, in the present moment, rather than always focused on, what needs to be done next. But we get very frustrated because they don't stick to the plan. They need a wee. They suddenly change their minds. And if we approach children with our work heads on, we don't connect with them. We don't enjoy them. We don't really bring the right strengths. So what the strengths that we need really to bring to parenting are much more around acceptance and empathy and curiosity and playfulness. And they involve stepping into the moment and really being present so that we can enjoy our children, but also do the right things that help them. So one of the big messages of the book is really just around being aware and intentional about switching between those two different mindsets. And, and I talk through lots of ideas about how you can do that. But I think that first step is to say, if I'm in hyper efficient mode when I'm with my kids, I'm likely to get frustrated. I'm likely to get stressed. I'll probably bring my stress into the home and I'm going to miss the wonderful point of children, which is their slightly chaotic kind of random nature, that if we can get ourselves in a place where we enjoy that, really makes family a lovely place to be.
Love that. And I'm imagining people are listening because I know my listeners and they tend to be quite type A preference, like I am, very driven, very conscientious, very kind of in time. We've got a plan. We want to go from A to B as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And that's great in the workplace. But as you say, when you try and apply that in your parenting realm, it leads to the frustration. It leads to the stress. It leads to the arguments. And it was just, I was smiling as you were talking because me and my husband often watch my daughter because my daughter's like, she'll walk out the house and she wants to smell every single flower. And she's just, and we call it Ava's world. And so many times we stop and we were like, let's just join Ava's world. Like, let's just join it because that's a really great place to be. And it's really hard for me to join that place. But when I do, I'm like, oh, this is joyous. But yeah, to make that switch.
And I would argue that that's actually the antidote to that hyper efficient thinking, that when we can step into Ava's world and be in the moment and really kind of be distractible ourselves and not be focused on a goal, we get the benefit of it as parents. We, that's mindfulness. That's kind of things that are really good for us. So it's not even that it helps us as parents, it helps us in terms of our well-being too.
Yeah, because I often have this kind of inner debate with myself about, do I have worse work-life balance since becoming a mum? Or do I actually have better? In that actually there's more chance of conflict between my parental and my professional identities. But whereas before with my type A preferences, I might work longer hours and just do what it takes to get the job done. Actually, with children, I can't do that anymore. So I'm kind of like, I feel more conflict between my identities, but actually, because I have to join their world and switch off from work and kind of try and be more present, well, actually, I've probably got a better work-life balance.
Yeah. It is when they just come into that sharp relief of clashing up against each other, don't they? When you've got two different things that you want to be doing at the same time. I want to be finishing this project and I want to be a great mum. And I think ultimately, we have to choose one side or another at any moment that we're going to be on. I know there are people who can do blending and who can kind of try and do the same at the same time, two things at the same time. I don't necessarily think that works for me. And I'm not sure in terms of my research around parenting that it's great for kids either.
Yeah. It's interesting because, because we've had many conversations on this, the research that I'm part of with the Global Leadership Wellbeing Solutions Group, we look at people that have a preference for work-life integration and those that prefer work-life segregation, and actually how that changes how we like to work, whether we can work from home well, whether the hybrid working piece. But I absolutely get what you're saying. Those might be from our preferences, but from a parenting perspective, the implications of that are huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, there's a mantra that runs through all the work I do with parents, both face to face and in my writing and speaking, which is about relationship, that parenting is a relationship you have with your children. It's not a project you're managing. It's not a set of tasks you're trying to complete or performance metrics you're trying to, kind of make sure you hit. It's a relationship. And if we can be really clear in our minds, that really leads us down a different path, because relationships require certain kind of nurturing and spaces and attitude. So yeah, that runs through all the work I do.
Yeah, I love that, because it's just making me think about each child. You think you're bringing them up the same in the same environment, but how different they are and how the quality of that relationship and what's needed in that relationship is different. And so tuning into that, but how difficult that is when we've got all the noise of work and domestic stuff going on. And I'm, as you know, personally very fascinated about the work that you're just about to release, because I've got an 11-year-old that's just about to leave primary school and he's going to secondary school. And I'm anticipating that we've got that big transition and the teenage years coming upon us. And I think the teenage years are kind of talked about a lot anecdotally. But in terms of parenting stuff, there's a huge amount for like new parents and the toddler years. But it feels like there's this black hole when you get to teenage years. And I kind of, I've kind of been curious about other parents' experiences, and you kind of get that, reaction of good luck with that. And it just has kind of put a bit of fear into me. And I think there's one parent I spoke to when I first had my son, and she'd got a teenager, and she actually said to me, I'm loving the teenage years. And she's the only person I've come across. She was like, I struggled with the toddler years, really didn't enjoy it, but I'm loving the teenage years. And it kind of opened in my mind this possibility. Oh, it may not be what I'm expecting, but I don't know what I'm expecting. And obviously you're just about to launch your book about teenagers. Would you mind sharing a bit about the title of the book, the premise of the book, and what kind of things are in there?
Yeah, so the book's called How to Get Your Teenager Out of Their Bedroom. And it is the book that I wish I could have read when I became the parent of teenagers, because you're absolutely right. There is a real diversity of experiences that parents have in the teenage years. And some teenagers, you know what? They're easy. They take the lovely, easy, sensible route through the teenage years, and they're a real pleasure. And other teenagers, they take the rockiest route possible, and it is really tough. It can just shake you as a parent to the core. And the problem is, I think one of the reasons there's a silence around parenting teenagers is we tend to think that, good kids had good parenting, bad kids had bad parenting. We get to the teenagers and our beautiful, lovely, sweet, compliant child randomly turns into, perhaps the more challenging teenager. And then we go into self-blame. We go into kind of that real sense of, I can't tell anybody about this. I can't tell anybody that my teenager's smoking weed, or my teenager has just turned around and told me to F off. And, or my teenager just goes in their bedroom and won't talk to me and just grunts at me, or whatever it is that's going on. We feel that sense of shame that somehow this must be my fault. I don't like this person. I've spent this first 10, 11 years learning how to be a parent, and I thought I was quite good at it. I got there in the end. I feel like I really found my feet, and I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of my child. And then it crumbles. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. It might just be a really natural part of teenagers pulling away. It's all about independence. It's all about separation. It could be around things like mental health. It could be that certain difficulties we didn't see earlier in their lives start to emerge, or they could just be the rather adventurous risk-taking ones who, are a real white-knuckle ride. So I wanted to write a book that was really empathetic, that gave parents of teenagers the recognition and support to say, I see you. I see how difficult this is, no matter what's going on. I know what that feels like because it's a time of massive emotions. One of my teens had particularly acute mental health problems, and I can honestly say it was one of the hardest things I'd been through as a parent. It was so difficult to manage that and to kind of manage my own mental health and well-being, to know what to do despite knowing the theory. So I set out to write a book that was a little bit of a guide rope that said, you know what, I can't give you a magic wand that's going to make all of this perfect. What I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you hope that this will all be okay in the end, that your teenager is not always going to be like this, that you are not always going to feel like this. I'm going to kind of listen to you and say, I know what you're going through, and I'm going to give you some ideas for you to try. And hopefully some of those might make a difference. But a little bit of a rope to guide people through, and particularly with that theme of relationship rather than control, because that's the central thing that's hard, I think.
How old are your children now?
So I now have young adults. You could say I have completed parenting. So my youngest is 21.
Okay. So you can look back through a different lens as well. So you can kind of, the hindsight piece gives you so much power.
Exactly. And I learned so much. And I learned through getting a lot of things wrong, to be honest, you know, and not getting it right. And I learned how to do really good listening, and I learned how to be supportive, and I learned how to decide when to be flexible on the rules and when to stand firm on them. And I just wanted not even to say to parents, you know, do it this way, but just said it's okay to learn through experience. And here's a few snippets that might be helpful on that.
And I can already feel my nervous system as you're talking, Anita, just like this warmth, because I think there is so much judgment and shame attached to parenting. And I know it's triggered so much for me. I'm like, oh, I didn't know my children were going to teach me all this stuff about myself. Like, I thought I was really self-aware. And I'm like, oh no, there's just all these layers that it kind of, and as you say, it kind of gets to your core. And just, I could feel the compassion, like the warmth of, do you know what? I can't tell you it's going to be perfect, but I can tell you we can do some stuff that will support you, and the compassion that comes with that. I really felt that. So I cannot wait to read it, because this is something that I'm just about to live through. I mean, just the fact that we're now at the stage where all of his friends, as they're transitioning to secondary school, are getting mobile phones. And I'm like, oh, every part of me is like, I don't want him to enter that world. I just don't want him to, but I know that I've got to embrace it. And then the questions of, well, what is the right time? And have I given him the skills to be able to navigate a smartphone and what that gives him access to? And and I'm like, I'm just on the cusp of this whole new world.
Yeah. I think you've hit on there something really important in the teenage years, which is the fear. There's a massive fear factor for parents. The stakes feel really high. You know, whether it's, you know, the potential of, you know, what could go wrong online, or whether it's exams or all of it, the stakes feel high. And at the same time, our ability to control goes down. And that takes a bit of getting used to, because whether you like it or not, you're not going to be in control anymore. And that's a hard transition, especially if you've been a parent who's been quite authoritative and, you know, been thrived, shall we say, on the control side of the warmth control kind of, you know, spectrum. Then that can be a real challenge.
I mean, I'm looking back with whole new compassion for my own parents, of like, gosh, how the hell did you navigate this with me? So I love that specific topic about kind of the bedroom piece, because we hear this, that, you know, teenagers often lock themselves off in their bedroom. And I wonder what you could speak to around that. I know that obviously in your book you're going to be sharing so much more, but that is what made you pick that as the title?
I think it was really about the fact that teens don't want to be in a relationship with us quite often, not in an active way. So part of the teenage years is being rejected, being pushed away by our children. And they will often do that just by closing a door. You know, sometimes they'll do it by screaming at us and shouting at us, but sometimes it's just a withdrawal and they don't really want to do things with us anymore. And I thought, well, how do you have a relationship? If I'm going to talk about the importance of relationship, how can you have a relationship with someone who's behind a closed door and just doesn't really want to do things with you? So I tried to sort of set out ideas, really specific ideas on what you could do to encourage teens to stay a part of your life, to build a relationship. And some of that was around, I think one of the big pieces of advice I give is about not criticizing them. So I go into a lot of detail really about neuroscience and the teenage brain and the developmental project and how teenagers have got a very hyperactive kind of threat system, and how when we try to give little nuggets of wisdom to them because we're trying to be helpful, for a teenager that often lands as criticism. So what they hear is you're saying I'm not good enough, when what we're saying is, oh, maybe you should try this, and we're being as gentle and as tentative as possible. And that really undermines relationship. So this puts parents of teenagers in an almost impossible situation. We want to support, we want to guide, we want to have a relationship. Whenever we say something, it puts their backs up and they don't want to be with us. What do we do about that? And hence the title. You know, most parents will say, well, you know, my teenager would be great, but they won't spend any time with me, or, you know, they're always gaming, or they're always on their phone. It might be their phone they withdraw into rather than their bedroom. So there are practical ideas around really simple ways to reach out and build relationship in those circumstances. And, you know, I give as an example, you know, I will often work from home in my kitchen, and I'll be sitting at the kitchen table. I've got, you know, I had teenage boys. Teenage boys get very hungry. So the one thing they will always do is come into the kitchen and raid the fridge. And I had a choice there. You can either use that as an opportunity and think, God, I've not seen them all day. I need to remind them. We need to remind them about their room, their revision, their studying, whatever it is. I'll have you done this. Or I can have just a really gentle joke with them, or a smile, or say something kind to them so that they're more encouraged to come in one more time. Whereas if I jump on that opportunity to achieve some sort of parenting end of, you know, telling them to do something, there's a very good chance they're going to avoid coming into that kitchen while I'm in it. So on a really simple level, what are the kind of the small actions that we can take? And my work is all about small actions that make a big difference. So what are the small actions? How do we kind of plan family time with a teenager who really would rather, I mean, you are bottom of the pile. Anything that's going on with their friendship group is going to be more important than spending time with you. So how do we collaborate with them to kind of plan those things? How do we make sure those things still happen? How do we adapt and compromise so that we kind of create those little micro bridges that keep the relationship going enough that we can support them and be there, rather than kind of using those little micro bridges to try and make ourselves feel secure by telling them what they should do. So it is the theme again, all about relationships, all about, you know, how we do that, but how much more challenging that is with teenagers.
And that feels so powerful just on its own, because I know that I could easily fall into the trap of, you know, oh, right, I've got you for 5 minutes. Let me tell you all the things that need doing, or all the things that haven't been done right, or whatever it might be. And what came to my mind as you were saying that, the power of relationships, and particularly when your relationship might be bottom of the pile with your teenager at that season in their life. That piece about keeping in relationship, because one of my fears is, well, what happens if their friendship group isn't the one that I would choose for them? And you want to stay connected enough that you're supporting them if you think, oh, I've got concerns about this group, because I'm assuming saying this isn't the group for you is not going to work. And having an opinion on that could be really tough to communicate in a way that would be heard in the right way. So building your relationship and having, as you said, those micro bridges is going to be fundamental.
Yeah. And I really believe that, you know, if you try and criticize, particularly with teenagers, but, you know, when I say teenager, you know, Nikki, they could be 11 plus. I mean, teenagers can become teenagers a lot earlier than 13. They kind of, you know, they make that transition and it can be very sudden. It can be one day you're like, whoa, where did this person come from? I don't know this person. And that's so hard that you've spent all that time getting to know, and we get a lot of payback from our kids. We get cuddles, we get adored, we get all of that. And then suddenly we're in this very different territory. And that can be really hard. And we have to be so focused on influencing.
Yeah.
And you don't influence by anybody by telling them they're doing it wrong. And a teenager especially. So yeah, hopefully, I've written it to really, as I said, to reach out to parents of teenagers and just give a little bit of hope and guidance and understanding. And if parents get even that sense of just comfort from it, that, oh my goodness, this isn't just me, because parents of teenagers do not talk to each other about this stuff. Then I will really feel like I've achieved something there.
And I think that's so important, because I'm also hearing from so many parents that, like, when they're at primary school, you're seeing the other parents on the playground, or you're in a WhatsApp group, because it's more of that close connection to your children and their education. But you lose those connections as they go to secondary school, even more so. And as you say, the kind of stakes and the shame might up gear. So even if you have got the connection, are you really sharing around it? So I think this is such important work that you're doing. So where can people find this book? I know that it's on pre-order. Where can people find it?
So it comes out on the 10th of September, 2024. And it's available, or will be available, on all good booksellers. It's already on Amazon. So it comes out the US and the UK same day, same title this time, which is really helpful. And then there will be an audiobook. There's an ebook as well, and they should all be coming out at the same time. But yeah, it is available to pre-order as of now. The other thing to do is just to stay in touch with me in terms of social media or signing up for our newsletters. And then obviously I'll be rolling out information, and hopefully there'll be a bit of a book launch if anybody wants to come along to that, at least a virtual one, if nothing else.
Brilliant. And we'll absolutely be sharing kind of your website and all of that towards the end of this. I'm just wondering, I know that your work speaks directly to the heart of my audience in terms of that conundrum around, as we've said, the parenting and the professional. I wonder if you could offer just one or two tips that, as you say, these micro tips that are small but have a big impact. What might be some of the key ones that you share with any working parent?
So I think one of the ones which I consistently, get the response from parents of, oh my goodness, that's so simple, but it's so effective, is to think about having a little bit of a routine, a transition routine between work and home, or work and parenting, but something that brings up those lovely kind of mum, dad, parental feelings that make us feel really well intentioned towards our children, so that we're halfway into parent mode before we even meet our children. And that could be something you just do at your home office, at your desk. The loveliest one to do, if you're good at visualizing, close your eyes and imagine your child's face. Or think of a memory with them. If they're, you can look at a photo. Some people find visualizing quite hard. You can look at a photo. You could look at a drawing that they've done. So behind my camera, I've got a wall, and I have lots of cards that my kids have given me, recently, and when they've actually said sweet things to me. So the one I've got right behind the camera right now is my most recent Mother's Day card. And, I will sometimes unpin that, take a look at it and read the words. And it says really sweet, simple things. And if we just spend, it might only take 30 seconds to do that. But by bringing to our minds the love that we feel for our children, we start to feel it. And then as we, walk out the door, or, of a home office, or walk through the front door, or go and pick them up from nursery, whatever stage, of their lives they're at, we're already halfway there. We're in the love stage, not the hyper efficient, oh my goodness, what have we got to do next stage? Yeah. So be intentional to kind of switch into your mum mode before you start talking to your kids, or you'll reconnect with them, and you will go through the evening. You'll still have just as much stuff to do. All the things that are on your to-do list will still be there, but you will approach them in a slightly different frame of mind. that will create a bit of space in terms of listening to your child and the way you're thinking and feeling about them.
I love that because there's such intentionality behind it and the energy you bring. It just reminds me of one of my really good friends, Felicity. She has this, she imagines every morning as she's getting her kids ready for school that she's kind of filling their bucket up with love and positivity, because she has this view. And I think it's such a powerful view that actually when she sends them out into the world at school, there's probably going to be people that take away their positivity or their sense of positive feeling about themselves. So she has this, like, my job of the morning is to fill them up with all of their potential and positive, good sense of self. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good mindset to be in, because actually the mornings can be stressing me, like, your shoe is on and we've got to, don't forget your reading book or whatever. And it can become more stressful. But to go, actually, my job at this point in the day is just to fill them with the love and the positivity about themselves. And I'm like, oh, that's one I really need to reconnect with more.
Yeah. And it also helps us. Those lovely positive feelings, again, are good for our well-being. And what a nice way to go into the evening or your parenting shift, just feeling, a little bit more positive in that way. So being intentional about transitioning into mum mode, I think is so helpful in every way possible. But also remembering that, if I'm going to set a goal for the evening, let's be clear, let's not focus on the tasks. The tasks are the worst bit of parenting. Trying to get them to eat broccoli or clean their teeth or do their homework or practice their violin or put their pajamas on, or, all the drudgery that we do on a day-to-day level with children. It really gets you down. If that's your focus in the evening, is how do I get through all of those tasks? Well, what about a different focus? What about a goal that says, if I have one goal this evening, my goal is to do one thing that will build relationship with my child. And that might be as small as a smile, a cuddle. It might be as small as, a little conversation. But my goal is to do one thing this evening that builds relationship. That's a goal, I think, if we're going to set ourselves, which is a much better one to have.
Oh, I think that is such a powerful point, and one that I'm definitely going to be taken away, because I can get so caught up in the tasks. So I know that people are going to want to read more about your books, your blog. So where can you point them to, Anita? You said, all of your socials. Where's the best place to find you?
Best place to find me is just head to my website, which is anitacleare.co.uk. In fact, if you just Google me, that will come up. So that's where you'll find my Thinking Parenting blog, which we do kind of weekly, fortnightly advice pieces around parenting. There's information about the books on there. You can click through to the socials. So we're on Facebook and Instagram, and also sign up for the newsletters. So every month, and literally I do not have time to do it more than once a month, we send out a little collection of articles and useful bits and pieces around parenting, just as a little reminder. And that's a really good way to stay in touch.
Brilliant. And on your website, you've got some phenomenal resources as well. So I'll put those all in the show notes and links to the books as well. But good luck with the book launch. Not that you're going to need it, because I think this topic is so important. But I just thank you for joining me and sharing with insight into your expertise and wisdom.
Oh, it is always a pleasure talking to you, Nikki.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.